was signed last week. To sign the petition against it, you can click the link in the description, click at the top, or scroll down, see how many signatures we've collected, and sign at the bottom. Don't forget to click the link in your email they send you, or your signature will not count. I have a question for you. I've been doing some research into fertility and the history of Canadian fertility, and the fertility rate during the Great Depression, so the 1930s to 1940s roughly, before the Second World War, was 2.87 to a low of 2.65, 2.64. And since 1965, Canada has been below Great Depression rates. So I had a whole video on this, and then I convinced myself that nobody would be interested. But my hypothesis is that something happened in 1965 that convinced women to stop having babies in the West. And I explore that in a video. If there's interest, let me know in the comments and I'll do it. But if there isn't, I'll continue on my merry way covering very interesting federal and some provincial politics. Come join the conversation. CanadaPoly.com has a free form. You have to register to view the form and to participate in the forum, but we'd love to have you. Please come and register. We are a growing forum, and it's free speech based, so come and have a conversation about Canadian politics. We'd love to have you. Maxime Bernier is sending out People's Party of Canada founding member certificates. They are, I don't know if they're laminated, but people are starting to receive them. His Twitter feed is full of people retweeting their People's Party of Canada founding member certificates, so that's pretty cool. I'm waiting for mine. I haven't got it yet. Darn postal strike holding up my People's Party certificate. It'll go up in my studio here, which is right beside my fridge. For real. Okay, so on to today's stories. I did this video last night, and I wasn't happy with how it turned out, so I'm going to do it again. This is Justin Trudeau talking about pipelines, and there have actually been developments since I went to bed last night on the pipeline. So here's Justin Trudeau talking about how there's no will for a pipeline through Quebec, so don't worry about Energy East. We'll just keep buying Saudi oil. And he talks about how Trans Mountain was saved by the federal government. Saved, eh? Sure. Okay, and then we'll look at the history of Energy East. We'll look at how it got held underwater until it stopped shaking. Until it stopped fighting, really. And the rest of Trans Mountain that's what they're doing to that now. And anyway, I'll let Mr. Trudeau inform us.
Range of issues, and we haven't spoken on this one yet.
Pipelines. Got to talk about pipelines. The Trans Mountain pipeline, your government bought it for over $4 billion. Bill Morneau was on this program, your finance minister. He said the shovels will be in the ground for construction season. That's passed. When will the shovels go in the ground?
Well, I mean, the Federal Court of Appeals came forward and said that we need to do a better job of consulting with Indigenous peoples and getting the science, particularly in regards to the environment, right on that. So we're going back to the process to try and make sure that we can get it right. Because one of the most important things, even more important than just any one pipeline, is a process whereby we can get big projects approved and built. Yes, Canada is moving forward on the knowledge economy, on innovation, but we're also always going to be a country that relies on natural resources. And getting these projects built the right way matters.
But there's some that are not getting built in any way.
Well, they're not getting built.
Are they going to be built in the next construction season?
We're working through the blueprint that the Federal Court of Appeals put forward to try and make sure that it gets done the right way, and that's the approach that we can take. Now, there are folks out there who says we should simply legislate this, or we should override the courts. The fact is, the approach of trying to marginalize Indigenous voices and ignore the environmental concerns was what Stephen Harper tried for 10 years, and he couldn't get things built.
The concern is that your bills, like 69, these pipeline assessment bills, they're so onerous that they're going to ensure nothing ever gets built, that they'll be suffocated under a series of virtuous assessments that leads to nothing.
I've heard that concern, many people, and we've actually sat down and talked with those people about what's in C69. First of all, you have to understand, C69 is an improvement over the existing environmental assessment that Stephen Harper put in place in 2012, which failed to be able to get licensed to build projects. So what we've done is we've done one project, one assessment. We're getting rid of some of the doubling that happened at the provincial and the federal level. We're making it clearer, we're making tighter timelines that we'll be stuck to. We're doing the kinds of things that investors and business have asked for to get clarity so things can get done, so they can know whether or not to move forward with a project. That's what we're doing.
Meantime, your former ally, Premier Notley in Alberta, is very angry. They call it a crisis. It is a crisis.
It is a crisis.
One other way to go is to say, and this would hit a couple things, stop importing 80,000 barrels of oil a day from Saudi Arabia for Canadians in the East and reignite the Energy East pipeline. That would help Alberta, that would help the refineries in the East, and you could actually get off a dependence on Saudi Arabian oil. Why not do that?
First of all, the situation that Albertans are going through now is of extreme concern. They are being hit with a differential that is a discount on Canadian oil that is really, really hurting them. And that's why we've been working with the Alberta government, with Alberta industry to try and support people. And we're going to continue to be there. And we're looking at a broad range of solutions.
The pipeline is the solution. They don't want EI. They want a job in a pipeline.
Yes, but the in order for a pipeline to come online this week, it would have had to be started effectively under the previous Conservative government. And we know that didn't happen because they didn't have the right approach on pipelines. So any solution as we move forward, right now, Albertans need help now, next week, next month. And we know that pipelines and even rail cars are a medium-term solution. We are working very hard on making sure that the Line 3 gets in place by next fall, which is what we're aiming for because we've approved that. We're working forward. We saved the Trans Mountain expansion by buying that Trans Mountain expansion pipeline. Now we have to move forward in the right way on it.
Okay, so just real quick answers then. Are you open to revitalizing an Energy East pipeline?
There is no project on the table. The proponent has walked away,
I understand that.
And there is
But if the government came forward to de-risk it, as you did with the Trans Mountain, maybe you'd get a proponent.
You can't de-risk in absence of a project, and there is clarity that under the current approach, there is no support for a pipeline through Quebec.
What Indigenous people just want to know.
So that's where I'm going to stop him there. So he will listen to Quebec if they say we don't want a pipeline, and there's a long history there since 2014, and I'm going to show you in just a minute. But he won't listen to people who do want a pipeline to BC. He won't listen to people who are protesting against increased immigration. Only 6% of people are on board with Mr. Trudeau's immigration plan, yet he listens to the people protesting against a pipeline through Quebec. That's very interesting. Or he knows how many seats are in Quebec versus how many seats are in Alberta, right? And the difference is 170, I believe, in Quebec versus 35 or 34 in Alberta. So that's the difference. He's pandering and making sure that he's going to get those Quebec votes and not. I mean, he knows that he doesn't have a chance in Alberta. Alberta is completely lost to the Liberals and specifically to Justin Trudeau because of his insanity. But I find this whole interview very interesting. Evan, I think, does a good job. He keeps bringing Trudeau back to things that he wants to talk about, like we're not getting any pipelines built, even though Trudeau's go-to line is get this done in the right way, right? He's using those words to try and convince people that they're doing something when what they're doing is, as I've said before, holding Alberta's energy sector underwater until it stops struggling. That's what they're doing. And it's incredible to watch because they're using taxpayer dollars to say, no, everything's fine. And to what extent? To the extent of another $1.6 billion. Liberals to announce, and this is this morning, $1.6 billion for Alberta's beleaguered energy sector on Tuesday report. And it says Canada's federal ministers of natural resources and international trade diversification are slated to announce new measures meant to back the country's struggling oil and gas industry in Edmonton on Tuesday. The Canadian press reported late Monday night that a source has confirmed to them that the energy industry will receive $1.6 billion in funding. The source told the Canadian press that the money will be spent to provide loans, invest in training and technology, and help companies invest in clean growth and to help energy firms find new markets. While the announcement is being made at a technology firm in Alberta, the new funding will be made available to oil and gas companies across the country, the Canadian press reported. The move comes as frustration among Alberta workers and politicians appears to be growing closer to a boiling point over the province's inability to fetch the same prices for oil as other oil-producing regions. On Monday, protesters gathered in downtown Calgary for what became at times a heated rally in support of increasing Canada's pipeline capacity. Kill Bill C-69. So this is a pipeline protest, and there were other rallies as well. The link is in the description. You can have a read. And I was telling you earlier I was going to show you the history of Energy East. Here's Financial Post reporting last year, October 12th, 2017, quote, I helped plan Energy East and I know the government's excuses are bunk. The former head of TransCanada Pipeline Strategy says Canada cannot afford to ignore the lessons of Energy East's demise. I was a senior officer of TransCanada Pipelines when the Energy East project was conceived and developed commercially up to the midsummer of 2014 when I retired. I continued to be a shareholder, but obviously I'm no longer a company insider. Two things are clear to me. One, the termination of the Energy East project is a major economic loss for Canada, removing an important option for providing market access for growing production from Canadian oil sands resource, including direct access to Eastern Canadian crude oil markets. Two, the Trudeau government should be stepping up to accept some real culpability for contributing to TransCanada's decision to abandon the project, instead of resorting to various sophistries and distortions. That means lies. The real lessons to be learned from the Energy East termination cannot be ignored if this country is ever to have a regulatory and public policy regime conducive for private capital to take the risks of major hydrocarbon infrastructure. Okay, that means if anybody wants to have any oil and gas companies come into Canada, you need to have a regulatory system that's predictable and friendly to it. That's what that means. Basically, stop legislating oil companies out of the game, because that's what they're doing. And this $1.6 billion is not going to help that. It'll stimulate a little bit of growth, but it doesn't address the problem. The problem is the legislation. The problem is there's absolutely no assurance that the pipe will get built because every man and his dog has the ability to veto it. It's insanity, right? And so the National Post is reporting, I just wanted to give you a number for the 80 million barrels we use of Saudi oil. National Post says, quote, why has Canada spent billions of dollars buying Saudi Arabian oil? Despite sitting on an ocean of oil, Canada still buys 300 million per month of Saudi crude. The link is in the description. You can read all for yourself about how much money is going to Saudi Arabia when it could be going to Alberta, right? No, not when you have a Liberal government, not when Justin Trudeau's in charge. So moving on, Max is also weighing in on the pipeline. What's the word? Inconsistencies, that's the word. So he's saying your approach is inconsistent, and it says legal, no social acceptability for a pipeline through Quebec. Trudeau, no social acceptability for a pipeline through Quebec and for oil tankers on the BC northern coast. Both social acceptability for oil tankers on St. Lawrence River. Where's the logic? And he's linking to an opinion piece from the Calgary Herald that says, why no oil tanker bans for Quebec? So I'll read this to you and then explain it because it took me a minute to understand what was happening. But basically, as I was saying earlier, they're holding down the energy sector underwater until it stops struggling. That's what's going on. Okay. Bill C-48, currently before the Senate, proposes to ban Canadian oil tanker transport for northern portions of Canada's west coast. Canadians, particularly those 160,000 unemployed Albertans who face an increasingly bleak festive season, may recall the outrage and protests that accompanied the proposal for Energy East, a 4,600 kilometer, $12 billion oil pipeline designed to carry 1.1 million barrels per day of oil sands crude from Alberta to refineries on the east coast for export overseas. The now defunct proposal by TransCanada includes an oil tanker terminal to be constructed in Quebec in the face of mounting protests. Then Premier Philip Collard advocated against the proposed terminal after government recognized the St. Lawrence River beluga whale populations as an endangered species. In April 2015, TransCanada abandoned the proposed construction of the terminal. Does this mean that tanker traffic incoming with foreign oil, Saudi oil, produces no effect on the St. Lawrence beluga population at present, or present significant environmental concerns to Canadian waters while proposed outbound Canadian oil traffic does? And yeah, that's the crux of it. Basically, they're saying, if you're bringing oil from Saudi Arabia, no problem. If you're sending Canadian oil to foreign markets, you propose a threat to wildlife or Canadian waters. That's what it boils down to. So the headline here is pointing out the hypocrisy. Maxime Bernier's tweet here is pointing out the inconsistency. You're allowing foreign oil a free ride while at the same time killing the Canadian energy industry through regulation and tax and all sorts of other red tape and bureaucracy. It's insanity. It makes no sense unless what you're trying to do is kill the energy industry. Maxime Bernier again tweeting about more environmentalism and globalist stuff. He says, quote, there is a huge difference between collaborating with other countries to pursue a common interest and, quote, seeing beyond our national interests. You were elected by the people of Canada to defend their interests. Whose interests are you working for? Hashtag globalism. And he's responding to Catherine McKenna, that climate minister's tweet of countries need to see beyond their national interests that requires solutions and compromises in the broader interest. And she's responding to her own tweet, I guess. Relationships matter at the end. These negotiations about trust, especially between developed and developing countries. Yeah, well, I don't know. We're doing a really good job at killing our own country right now with regulation and all sorts of other things to make us poor. Mass migration into a welfare state is just insanity. It's a recipe for disaster. It's suicide. It's suicide for a country. And on top of that, we've got a climate minister who's so out of touch that she's more worried about straws than about literal human feces in the St. Lawrence, and a prime minister who doesn't understand the difference between EI and removing limitations that are preventing pipelines from being built. Alberta wants pipelines. Alberta wants companies that are interested in building pipelines, and the Liberals have done everything they can to dash every public company's hopes of building a pipeline. And then they used taxpayer money at almost double the valuation of a 65-year-old pipeline to take it off the hands of the company that was going to do it, and already started under Harper. And now it's sitting idle because with our taxpayer dollars, because Justin Trudeau can't follow his own rules that he created to get it done. That's the situation Justin Trudeau is in. And he's in an election year. This would be absolute suicide for anybody who didn't own the media. Really. Really. Okay, well, that's enough for me this morning. That was a longer video than I thought. Thanks for watching, and yeah, have a great day.